the last the last card that we'll be making for our September card class for Simply Stampin' for You is an Upsy Daisy embossing card. We're using some of the new designer paper and also some of the new in colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of white cardstock, that's going to be my background, and I'm just going to use my scraper just to make that a nice crease. I'm going to go ahead and adhere or put on my piece of rich raspberry. This is going to give it some stability on the back of the white. The white's not always the most stable color, so it gives it some nice stability so it doesn't seem so flimsy. And it looks pretty too. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be doing some embossing with white embossing powder. And I'm going to just take this regular piece of old olive cardstock, and we're going to be using the Upsy Daisy stamp set. It's not a new stamp set in the Holiday Mini, but it is a very pretty set, and we haven't used it yet during our classes. I'm going to actually use the Stampin' here just to line it up so that it has a nice edge all the way around. We found that if we use this, we don't need the white or the clear piece because we're not layering anything, but just so that it gives us a nice edge all the way around. What I want to do before I do embossing, and you need to really be careful when you're using black, but when you're using other colors, something that you might want to use is the embossing buddy. And what it'll do is it will take away the static that might attract those embossing pieces, just extra little particles. Okay? We'll also be using Versamark. It's a clear embossing ink so that it doesn't show anything and it won't show up. And I like to, again, because this is a bigger stamp, go upside down with it so that I can sort of see the coverage of my Versamark ink pad. And I can see that it's fully covered everything. Alright, so I'm going to set that off to the side. You can use Versamark ink for lots of things. I'm going to line it right up into the corner here, and that's what I was talking about getting a nice edge. And when you're using a Stampin' Majig, all you need to do is line it up to wherever you want it to be, and usually you would use that clear plate and stamp on it ahead of time in case you wanted to line something up that you thought maybe would go over the edge. But for this case, we're going to do that. We're going to put our stamp right up to the edge here in both corners, and all we're going to do is go straight down. Ooh, and it's stuck. Now, it's hard to see because it's clear and it's a watermark stamp pad, but the image is there. We're going to set this off to the side temporarily, and we're going to get out our white embossing powder. We like to keep ours in plastic containers so that you don't have to try and get it all back into this little embossing container. And we also like to keep a small paintbrush or cosmetics brush with it because it helps to be able to, if for whatever reason you have extra little particles hang on, you can kind of brush around the image. The Stampin' Up! Embossing powder is really fine, and it really makes a beautiful effect on your page. So we're just going to hold our image. Woo! I didn't need that much. And actually you don't need a lot because you're going to kind of shake it as you move it down, and that embossing powder should cover. And I like to tap it a little bit. Now I do have a couple places where I'm seeing some extra, so I'm just going to use that brush and I'm just going to clear that off, because if I leave it on there and I heat emboss it, it will set that way and you'll see that image. So that looks pretty good. That looks really nice. And that way I can use this, I can use a spoon, I can re-scoop it up, I don't have to try and get it back into that little container. Alright, I'm going to use my heat tool to set this embossing powder on the old olive. It may be a little loud. I like to lift mine up a little bit so that it doesn't overheat or wrinkle. It may wrinkle a little bit on the edges. And I like to do in a circular motion because if you stay in one place too long, it could burn your paper. And when it's ready, you should sort of start seeing it turn from a matte to a glossy finish. And it is on that side there. Once the heat tool heats up, it goes pretty quickly. And now I can sort of look from above and just make sure, but it should have a glossy look to it. Alright, the other piece that we're going to be using, or the other thing that we're going to be using, is a new designer paper. This is the Cottage Wall designer paper. It's very pretty. There's lots of different designs, and this is actually how we got the inspiration for our color combination for this card, was from the colors that came out of this paper. I really like these small dots. We are going to actually be using the spiral punch on this piece, on one of the sides, one of the long sides. And how the spiral punch works is actually you line it up, and like I said, for all the other punches that I use them upside down so that I can see and I have a better grasp on what's going on. And you're going to line it up, and there's a little edge right here where you can line your paper up and it won't let it go too far. And all you're going to do is punch. And then in the next one, you're going to line up the last one that you punched. You can sort of see that it fits right into the end of that spiral. You're going to line that right into there, and that will line it up nice so that you get nice, even spaces between all of your spirals. You can use the spiral punch for lots and lots of different things. Okay, so you have a nice spiral edge alongside there. Now if I wanted to, I could be a little gutsy and try to line up my spirals if I wanted to get this. And I do, but you don't have to. Just so that it looks nice and even along the sides. I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on the back. And I'm going to line this up on the left-hand side of this card. A little embossing powder left. Not covering up the white part, but just covering up that rich raspberry piece of paper. Okay. The next thing I want to do is take my little piece of Whisper White, and the other punch that we're going to be using is the spiral, or not the spiral, sorry. We're going to be using the scallop edge punch. This is one of my favorite punches. I really love scallops, and we tend to use the circle scallop and the scallop edge punch a lot, but that's because we love them so very much. And what I'm going to do is, you can use this punch in different ways, and normally we say use them upside down, and you are more than welcome to do so. But on the front of this, there's some guides, and I really like to use those because it helps me make sure that all of my scallops look even. So I'm going to take my piece, and I want it to be on the long side here. And I kind of can see that on both sides of my guide, it's lined up in the same place, and that's where I want to punch first. So I'm going to punch that out, and you can see that that's what happens. Now I can use these silver scallops, spiral scallops. We can use the silver scallops to line up the rest of our scallops here, and then it will punch that right out for you. The only thing you have to be careful is with this last punch, this is no longer attached, so if you push too hard, it can tend to bend in. So just be careful about that, but I just try to line it up with the silver piece. And then we have that piece right there. Okay. And we are going to use our adhesive, and we're going to attach this. Now this one's a little bit different because it's just going to sit, but we want to make sure that on the top and bottom of our card, it has about the same margin here. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to attach our old olive piece of cardstock that we did our embossing on. Now because we did some embossing, you may want to add a little bit of extra adhesive because it does tend to curl sometimes once you've heat set it. And we're going to kind of just make sure that it goes right into the center of all of that, and it kind of layers on top of both of those things. And I think that with our, and you can see it's kind of curling up, so because it's not stuck down, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some more adhesive because I really want that to lay nice and flat. I think that the two different punches added a little bit of interest to this card. We had a difficult time figuring this one out, but I think that the end result is very beautiful. So that's our Upsy Daisy embossing card.